Okay, you're all going to have to give consent now. Um, so just two things that had come up when we met 2 weeks ago had to do with what is our relationship with the building and how do we understand the nature of our mission. Both relevant, but very different, it seems to me, in terms of kind of where they fit in the scope of our consideration. And those are certainly not the only things we need to be talking about. And I may not have framed them in a way that was particularly helpful. That was part of what Nancy was getting back to me about, was that option 2 suggested that as the congregation, we might create a not-for-profit, some kind of organization that was going to be managing the building, and then the worshiping congregation would pay rent. And Nancy was like, folks aren't going to like the idea of owning a building and then you pay rent. It's like, it's not, so, it's those kinds of things. It gets clunky. But if I had to, I've moved a long ways from where I was 2 weeks ago. I'm thinking you probably have too. I hope you have, because that's what happens when we sit in discernment. The thing that's coming up for me most vividly right now, and it could easily be different tomorrow, is that the central thing we have to do as the discernment team is to clarify the purpose of Pilgrim. That the other stuff, like our relationship with the building, that all derives from what is the purpose of Pilgrim. And there are different ways of framing how we understand the purpose. But if we all come together around that, then I think we've got a really solid place to move forward. One of the things that I have been wrestling with is that purpose is something that is unique to a particular organization. And I've decided that we don't have to worry about being unique. We're not going to be able to avoid being unique. That's not something we need to lose sleep over. What we need to worry about is being faithful. And as long as we're being faithful, then everything else is going to fall into place. A lightning may strike the building, but it may start something new. It's sort of like the testimony that Rana was hearing earlier. So the simple thing, to respond to what Jenny was saying about how do we frame this simply, the simple thing is that our purpose is to embody Christ. We are the body of Christ. Now, teasing that apart and saying, well, what does that mean for us, for who we are in this time, in these place, that can get immensely complicated. And that may not be a metaphor that works for most folks, but it was, Paul thought it worked for him. So we've got the good precedent there. So anyway, that's sort of where I am at this point. So Ron Galson?
Yeah, I wasn't part of the discussion a couple of weeks ago on the building itself and the congregation and the connection there, but I just want to say that for many churches, the building does not have to be a part of who the congregation is moving forward. That's not always that important. But in Pilgrim's case, I feel that it is immensely important. It's not only critical, it's mandatory that if Pilgrim is to move forward, it must be done in this building. And that's because the story of Pilgrim and the future of that story cannot receive any greater impact than what currently exists. And if you waste that by moving to a new building and trying to duplicate what you have now, you might as well shut down tomorrow. You have a tremendous importance in what happened within this building, not only in 1953, but before that. And that is the story. That is the story you can move forward with in a very positive way. And not having been here for that discussion, I just wanted to make, whether you agree with me or not, I just wanted to make that statement from my view. That's how important this is, that we remain in the building and try to make this work in some way with the congregation staying in the building. That's my 2 cents.
Well, let me just respond to that. I think other people will have responses too. I think the chances of the building continuing and being a resource to the neighborhood is actually better than the chances that the worshiping congregation will continue and be a resource to the neighborhood. That red granite building is going to be around a long time. And so the question for me is not will the building be there. Nancy was saying, people are saying, oh, I want to be sure the building is there so I can be buried from there. Well, the building's going to be there longer than any of us are. It's not, I don't see anybody tearing that building down. The question is, will it be well maintained, supported? Is it actually available as a resource for the neighborhood? And it seems to me that if the people who are managing it are people who really know about how to manage a building, like you do, Ron, but Pilgrims, for the most part, didn't join Pilgrim because they wanted to get into building management. So it may be that there are others who can do the job better than those of us who choose to be members.
You can hire somebody to do that. Not me, but you could hire somebody to be a building manager that would do as good a job as I do. The building itself is not necessarily going to be a benefit to the neighborhood. I just read today about a church that had been converted to a 10 condominium complex. The church is no longer a church. It's a 10 condominium complex in the middle of a neighborhood where it used to serve the neighborhood. So just because the building is there does not mean it will continue to serve the neighborhood. It doesn't serve the neighborhood as a high profile 10 condominium conversion. That doesn't serve the community in any positive way. So it can remain. The one, for instance, there's a church on the Kings Highway right now, a block from Delmar. You may have seen the sign that says it's for sale. That's going to be for sale forever. It's $3.5 million. Nobody's going to buy that. Now, the only way they would buy it is if they converted it into some type of a condominium, the same as that other one. But it is not a viable option as a church at $3.5 million. It's just not. So the building itself may last, it may not last, but the story of the congregation can continue even with a small congregation, and it can grow from that. Doesn't have to grow, but it can grow from that if the story of the church matches a justice-oriented future that can exist. Membership can grow, but it's got to grow from the heart of what the future looks like. And if the future doesn't look like anything that somebody wants to be a part of, then it's never going to grow. But if it is something that somebody wants to be a part of, it can grow. And that is happening at other churches.
Anybody else want in here?
I haven't heard it quite this way before, but I think you have a gift there in your name. Because when I think of Pilgrim, I think of the church and the community, but several of you have referred to the pilgrim, referring to the members. And, so what is it to be a pilgrim? And reclaiming that sense of who you really are as individuals in community, because the pilgrims are on a journey to find a sacred place. And what would it be like if everybody kind of re-envisioned for themselves what that means for them? But then you also do that in community. So I hadn't really thought about each person involved in your community as being a pilgrim. I think that's a great way to frame, what you're about, individually and collectively.
Anyone else?
Well, one thing that Reverend A and I are working on, which I think may help a little bit with some of the things I was sharing earlier. We're going to do a series in August where we're going to invite people to share their kind of pandemic pondering, what they learned from what they missed about church, what they enjoyed about being in virtual worship, what they are looking forward to, kind of. And so it's like a snapshot of this part of our journey together. You see what I'm saying? And I'm hoping that it would then morph into, I mean, this will just be a first kind of try at it, but it's a storytelling, sharing, that this part of our journey. What did, for instance, what might I learned to garden during this time, which I didn't do that before the pandemic. I didn't have the time, I didn't have the energy. So that's something that you as other people in Pilgrim would learn about me and give that more sense of connection. And I think that's something that I'm hoping will help us to just begin to see ourselves as pilgrims moving together. Because I do think we've had a very unique journey in these past 15 months. Other churches have too, but I think ours has been, we've kind of held together. Pretty much the same folks have been participating over whatever changes have happened. And I think that's to our credit, that there's something holding people together. And I want to kind of discover what that is, what's held us as a congregation.
One of the themes I heard in speaking to people was about giving ourselves permission to start small or be small in terms of whether it's service or like what Rana just described, that we have a history when we were a bigger church of being or trying to be sort of all things to all people. And that's just not possible without burning folks out when you have a smaller congregation. So rather than bemoan the small congregation, maybe thinking about what is one thing or what are two things that we can take on and get behind that and be prayerful and excited about that. So I think this idea of not seeing it as giving ourselves permission to be a little bit more simple. I'm sorry, I didn't hear what Jenny had said earlier, but maybe it's connected to that. I'm not sure.
Ken, you haven't had a chance to weigh in. Do you want to?
I do, but it's kind of a different direction than the conversation answering your question. Okay, so I'm hesitating to do that. Let me tell you what it's about, and you can see if it fits later in our chat. Okay.
Well, we don't have an agenda for me to figure out where it goes better. So why don't you share it and we'll see what happens.
My interest is in having those of you who are from Pilgrim share with me the challenges you have with communicating to your membership roster. Okay. It would be very helpful for me to have you explain what's working or not working, and thus would give some fodder for trying to find a way to improve, enhance, achieve successful communication. I have an idea if it fits, but I think it's first important for me and others to hear kind of what's broken and not working, and what is not broken and what is working in your current system. My interest would be to spend a few minutes on that if possible. Okay.
If I could do a follow-up to Carol's comment. Um, I think that's an important reflection she gave, because I think sometimes in the mindset of organizations and various groups, we get caught up in attempting to do so many things and big things, and you just don't have the capacity to do that. I think it's okay to recognize that, hey, we're small and there's only so much we can do. And then when you think about that, you have to have the willingness to step back, think deeply, and ask yourself, what is it that we can do with what we have, and be okay with doing that well. Because sometimes we think that, okay, the community is looking at us in a certain way, and if we don't follow the norms of how everyone else is processing through, we're going to be seen differently. I say it's okay to be seen differently in some matters. That you can only do what you can do, but I think what's most important is whatever you decide what that is, to be faithful as Mark framed it, and be successful in that. Because it takes a lot of energy, a lot of time, planning to put a lot of things together, when you can just simply do the 2 or 3 things. Say, this is what we're going to focus on as an organization, as a church. Be as creative as we possibly can with that, move forward, and leave space for God to do the rest. And you keep hearing me say God and Christ and those things, because I think sometimes we leave God out because we're so focused on us, the human ability to accomplish things. And I'll just be honest with you. I don't know how you can be a church and leave God out. That's just my theology. And so, we overwhelm ourselves unnecessarily because we, get caught up in trying to do too much. And so, I just think we, need to recognize, hey, we're small. there's 100 and something, some people, number of people on the roster, maybe more. But if you only get 25 that are faithful, you'll be amazed at what God can do with the 25. If that 25 is reasonable, discerning, and allowing God to lead through the process, or give vision to what that is, and power behind it, I think you'll be amazed at what can happen. Yeah.
So we must not be afraid to do small things well. As long as those small things we're doing well are, in fact, an expression of faith, that we're being faithful. And the other theme I'm hearing is that there are, for us to be successful, we don't need to get all 100 on the roster. If 25 show up, that's great, but they have to be connected to each other. Because well, part of what Rana was saying was it's a feeling like we're not as connected as we might be. And Ken asked the question, I mean, I'm not going to say this the way you did, Ken, but something like, what are the barriers for us actually communicating with each other? What's in the way? Is that a fair paraphrase, Ken?
Right.
So part of what's coming up for me, the agenda that I wasn't sure whether we would have time to get to. So maybe I'm not leading us where we want to go here. But part of what we left, those of us who were at the Mercy Center 2 years ago for that retreat, one of the things that we left with was a sense that two issues that Pilgrim needed to address had to do with communications and governance. I think the governance issue was we were noticing that we have this whole structure that calls for these various ministries, and most of them aren't really functioning, or if they function at all, it's by one or two people doing all the work. And so that system, the way that we have decided to be together, isn't really happening very well. And communication is that one of those ministries, communication and evangelism, I don't think it's met for about 6 years now. And so the part of Pilgrim that would otherwise do that is not really in place. So communications and governance being two pieces, I'm not sure they're really two separate things. So I want to suggest to you that governance, the word governance the root of it comes from the idea of steering. Like you're going to steer a boat. How do you steer a boat? And this came up in the Living with Intention meetup that some of us are in. Was remembering canoeing on a lake. You know, when you're canoeing across a lake, you kind of pick a tree on the far side of the lake that you're going to aim towards, but you never run into the tree, because by the time you get close to that, you pick another target, and you're so there's something out there that you're moving towards, but it's not where you expect to arrive. It gives you a bearing. So what are we aiming towards? But in order to, if you're out on the seas, you have to know where you are. So where are we? Is it kind of the communications piece? Are we talking to each other in such a way that we really know who it is that we are? What's happening to us? Do we have a sense of the connectedness between us? So do we know each other, and do we know what's going on? And if we know where we are and we know where it is we want to be, then the question is, well, how are we going to get there? Who's going to trim the sails? Who's got the rudder? How are we distributing responsibilities so that we are working as a unit to move us all to where we want to be? And so there are these sort of three aspects to good governance. Where are we going? What is our purpose? What is our vision for where it is that we're, what is our connection to each other? Are we aware of what's happening? And are we able to make decisions together in such a way that everybody's doing their own job and we're mutually accountable to each other? And so there are some, Ken's question raises, if that's not happening, why? What's in the way? What's in the way of our being able to do what I think we're pretty much in agreement we need to be doing? Can we talk about what's not working? It's very hard to solve a problem when you can't talk about what the problem is.
My theme for this new year, I actually got from an advertisement that said, don't renovate, reinvent. And that struck me. It came to me at a time when it was really timely. But I do think finding that balance, and by listening to the Holy Spirit and the guidance, it is finding out when is it time to just sort of renovate, make adjustments, and when is it time to step back and reinvent where we are and where we're headed and how we're going to do that. And we just get, I think, trapped in systems that we inherit, and we don't necessarily question them. But that's what the Holy Spirit helps us do, is say, okay, this is where the life is. This is the vitality of this situation. Let's focus on that, And so what if we can't man all the committees or, do the functions that we've done for years? Maybe it's time to let some of that go and figure out who are we now and where are we headed. So I just thought to that.
Putting in the chat 2 books that this woman recommended that I don't know if they're any good or not, but they sounded great. And she also, one other thing she said was that she got down to just having 2 committees, that they just let everything go except for the 2 committees, and they they decided it had to be gift-based and decisive committees, that they needed to be not just waffling around on stuff, but that they were able to make decisions together. And they waited until they had people that had the gifts to fill the positions. So if they didn't have anybody do missions or membership or whatever, you waited until till that person was, saw that as a place and had the particular gifts to do that. Because they just, she talked about placing the wrong people in positions to do things that they're not really equipped to do. I do think that that's hindered us, because I think we technologically, our communication strategies, I think, are just right outside of most of our reaches. Like I'm one of the people on Facebook, and I can just barely figure out how to post things. So I'm not really the best person to be doing that. It needs to be somebody who's adept at that, or enjoys it, or whatever. And so I think we have too many different ways to communicate, and none of them are very effective, in my opinion. I think we have one call, we have a email blast, we have Facebook, we have a website that's not functional, and we have one, and I said one call. So and the newsletter. And so then all of those, you have to try to navigate all of those to get what's going on if you're not a part of the decision-making group. And I think that's really hard for people. They definitely need to streamline somehow, but I don't know how to do that exactly.
Something you just said, Ronna, kind of tipped off something in my head, which gets a little bit back to the simplicity idea, and also what Jerry said. Sorry, this isn't communications, Ken, but if we capitalized on the fact that we can't do soup kitchen in the same way going forward. We don't have the folks to do it. Instead of bemoaning that, maybe there's a way to do food pantry, or maybe we take stuff to Centennial and make donations and further that connection and relationship. But maybe there's a way to, you know, renovate / reinvent and have even though they're going to be people who are upset about this, because that's one of the main things that they do to give to the community and to the church, you know, maybe it's our chance to say, okay, let's pick one other thing together that we feel, most of us feel good about, that we want to do, whether or not hopefully it's the neighborhood, but we don't want to be imperialistic about what we're trying to do in the neighborhood either. You know, so maybe there are ways to bring folks in to have a dialogue with the neighborhood about, look, we're letting go of one service because we can't do that anymore, but we want to do something that matters, that makes a difference, you know, and talk about that. I don't know. That would be an interesting sort of thing to try to arrive at as a group.
Thank you, Carol. That conjured up for me. That conjured up for me the thought of when you start saying, okay, for example, we can no longer do soup kitchen, and then people start to feel some kind of way, right? So I'm not going to participate. I'm not going to participate, and I'm not sending, you know, going to volunteer for anything. I'm not offering my offertory gifts. You know, I just wanted to say that because you brought that to mind when you mentioned the soup, because people turn and posture themselves that way.
Mhm.
You know, you know,
Right.
yeah, and it makes the situation more complicated, especially when you're talking about trying to build a relationship, right? they
Right.
don't even consider all the other elements that come with that when you start to saying, I'm going to distance myself now because we can't do food kitchen, soup kitchen.
Right.
Yeah, it creates problems sometimes.
Oh, I fully would expect that. On the other hand, it's a reality that I think that we can't do that anymore. So at some point you kind of have to say, guys, this isn't necessarily our choice, but we need to kind of right size ourselves with some service that we can all participate in, even if it's painful. Maybe this is where there need to be one-on-one conversations with some of the people who are the most upset about it, that not necessarily with Reverend A or Rana having those, but like other people reaching out and saying, hey, we're trying to figure out a new, here are some options that we've come up with for new service things. You know, does anything appeal to you?
Right. I think what I'm trying to do, because that's part of my job with the grant, is to assess the food pantry. And, you know, I just don't feel like sending out a questionnaire, you're going to get the folks who care about it say, yes, I think it needs to happen. And everybody else say, we can't do this. And it just becomes, some kind of crazy process that, buries the whole thing and we don't know where to go from there. So what I've been trying to think of is how to honor what has gone before and, really have some kind of, because next year would be 40 years. So actually, 2022 is going to be 40 years. So, if we could say, let's gather the stories about what meaningful things happened and what lives were changed and how it engaged people and all that, and give it its propers kind of, and then say, now we're going to launch into something else. And the something else is, maybe we can be a place where all kinds of UCC churches can contribute food, and we can make sure it gets to Centennial, and they can just, we can just make their ministry blossom. but we're helping. We're doing a piece of it. We're a cog in the wheel, but we're not in, the front line. And then I also thought about, for some of the people that want the hands-on, building that partnership, having there be a particular part of that ministry that pilgrims could do. So they need help with their inventory. Well, that's not something that, all of our people could do, but some of folks could go and, keep track of their inventory in their food pantry, and that would, that's something that they don't have the, the warm bodies to do, because they're out on the front lines doing all other stuff. So just those are the kinds of things that I'm thinking, but it's how to articulate that, how to communicate that, to get the buy-in, is all difficult. And I think you're right about needing it to be a multifaceted way of communicating and making sure that those folks that have got that investment, and they all won't be happy about it anyway, but at least we've kind of given them their time.
Jenny and Ron.
To me, one of the most interesting questions for this smaller group to talk about is, how do we pick that something else? So if we're, identifying that we have, our resources are what they are, and that we are going to be more effective if we pick one or two things, how do we pick those things? And, what if as we think about our purpose or mission or whatever we want to call it, how do we articulate it in such a way that helps us answer those questions? And also not just like, what is the statement that we come up with, but I think it's how we answer the questions and the process we go through. And to me, like the question about, how we respond to food insecurity, which we have been doing primarily through the food pantry and soup kitchen over.
Oops.
I just, for me, other people have talked about
Jenny,
the importance of.
We lost you for about 10 seconds. Why don't you
Okay.
rewind and say again what you were saying?
Well, as we try to set priorities, I don't think it's a question we can answer just by engaging members of Pilgrim. And other people have talked about, how do we, kind of turn outward and, think about something like the soup kitchen from the perspective of our immediate community and, the broader St. Louis community. But again, to me, it's all part of this, what is our process for figuring out how to set the priorities. Because I mean, we all each have ideas, and, the ideas that Rana mentioned, sound good and like they could work well, but what's the process we put them through so that we get up with something robust and self-perpetuating, and again, something that people feel connected to and it's meaningful.
Mm-hmm. Ron Gauss, did you want in there?
Yeah, I thought of something as Rana was speaking, and if we would want to continue the, this is a little out of the box thinking here, but if we would want to continue the soup kitchen, one way that we might consider doing that is contacting the Bouquet Club. They had committed to providing us a free meal once a month near the end prior to COVID. And we have something they need, which is a parking area. If they were to commit to providing us weekly meals, the entire meal, in exchange for the use of our parking lot for the Bouquet events, that's equivalent of about $125 per week that we would be losing in exchange for getting a free meal for 75 to 80 people, which seems like a fair exchange. If we would do something like that, we could still possibly commit to providing at least 1 week of the month folks from Pilgrim to serve those meals, and then contact other UCC churches or other churches that aren't UCC in the area to help in a community effort to provide meals as in the past on the soup kitchen. In other words, this would be a way to continue what 38 years ago started and do it without as huge a commitment as we have had to make in the past. Continuing the program, but without our heaviest involvement as we've had in the past. Just throwing that out there as an option.
I want to add an idea for you all to ponder. I'm imagining something like a two-prong event, one that celebrates the since 1930 effort that you all did, and its theme would be celebrative, and it would be to talk about what's next. I think it would be, I know for one thing from the churches I know, we are never good at saying enough thanks for people who have done long service for the church. And if that applies here, maybe there are some people who need some extensive thanks stated and acted on their behalf. And while you're at that event and you get around to dessert and you've done the thank yous, you've got a people you know who are interested gathered, and then say to them, maybe Ron's idea ought to be talked about. Or maybe there's several people in the room who have. The point is, there's 2 points here. One is to do some thank yous, which as I listen to you all, you are so struggling hard with how to continue, that it may be you all need a break, and to be able to say thanks to people who took you this far. And maybe you could get people involved in I'm thinking the end of the evening, so I'm thinking dessert time, just before you hand out the ice cream, to ask people to say, you know, that we've done this wonderful thing for 30, 40 years, or 50, whatever it is, 50 years. Having done that, what's our generation going to do? Does that sound like a way forward a little bit?
I like the way you phrased it, Ken. It kind of builds on, adds to what Rana, I think, was envisioning.
Yeah, I had a kind of a catered brunch kind of thing in my mind because they're mostly elders. And so evening times aren't usually great for them, but you know, to have people like Connie and, you know, share from her mother's perspective, you know, what her, you know, to give some kudos to Nadine for her mother's contributions over the years, and Mary Heiniger's, you know, I mean, we've lost many of the key people in those that led the way, and the folks that were still holding on, I mean, we need to honor them as well. So Uh-oh, sorry.
I wanted to say just one more thing kind of around how we approach these questions. And I don't know, has anybody here read Canoeing the Mountains, one of the books that was recommended? I have not either, but I know it is about adaptive leadership, and I've done other reading on adaptive leadership. And it's the Canoeing the Mountains refers to the Lewis and Clark expedition, because they were planning to navigate the Missouri River to, follow it to the Pacific Ocean. And they were very prepared for traveling on a river, and they had everything they needed to travel on the river. And what they weren't prepared for was the Rocky Mountains. And the fact that the river was not navigable, and they had to figure out how to get across the mountains with everything, with their supplies being what you would need to travel on a river. And it's so often in situations like this, people have a technical response, like what are the details that we need to focus on, to fix this problem. And adaptive leadership is asking, it's like, how can the adaptive approach is how can you engage the people to solve the problem themselves in a really deep and lasting way. So to me, the as we're kind of grappling with the purpose of how we determine the purpose of Pilgrim and communicate it and set up systems to enact it, I think that question of technical responses versus adaptive responses is a really interesting one. Because this is kind of autobiographical, because I've been, in my working life, I definitely struggled with that transition from being more of a manager and coming up with technical solutions to whatever the issue was. And then trying to kind of, think in a way that is more adaptive and bigger picture. And, how can you engage the people involved to, come up with new approaches that just lead in very exciting new directions that no one person could envision. So.
Jenny and I are in book group together and have been for a long time. And so she knows that I do not have the greatest record of reading the books in book group. That said, I wonder how long, has anybody Googled this to see how many pages this book is? Do we have time to read it and, as a group and discuss it as a way to apply to this situation? Or
we could do that. There are some shorter articles. There are some articles that I think probably really short articles that probably kind of distill it enough that we could talk about it.
That could be good too.
Yeah.
Sometimes I think we struggle for a joint language here a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah. If we were going to read a book together, we'd have to be really sure it was the right book. But if it's articles, if you come across an article, you say, oh, this is I've sent you articles. I don't know whether you've read them, but I think that's a way of continuing our conversation and connecting it to the rest of the world. So yeah, let's feed each other information that we think is relevant. Part of what it raises for me, Jenny, is your question is, to what degree is the purpose of Pilgrim connected to the transformation of its members. Are we willing to be changed by being pilgrims? Certainly, I mean, to go back to Jerry's observation about being on a pilgrimage, people go on a pilgrimage in order to be changed by the journey. That's what it's a spiritual discipline to be on a pilgrimage. To what degree are we looking to be transformed by our association with Pilgrim?
I want to go back to Ken's question about communication. I think one of the issues that I see is that, you know, all of us are involved in Pilgrim in many different ways. And there are also pilgrims that are not involved in many different ways. So that those of us that are involved, we have access to information and things that are happening. And for those that only come for church and are not involved, don't have that information, don't have that access. And so that, to me, can create some issues, because some of us know about things that are happening. And so when these things come up, we're not surprised. For other people who are not involved and those things come up and they have no knowledge of it, then they are surprised. And sometimes they can be resistance, because it's not something, you know, it may be something that they, since they don't have any information about it, may not have an opinion, or it may be something that they just disagree with because they don't have the same kind of background information that maybe some of the rest of us have. So I see that it's at least one of the issues.
Right, so the infrastructure isn't there.
Or even who's supposed to communicate it. I mean, because sometimes I feel like I try to communicate the things that I'm responsible for or working on, but there are other things that I know folks don't know. And so then I kind of sometimes try to bridge those by, calling the people who aren't on the email list, or checking with the people who don't get Facebook.
Or in my case, I'm married to the
that I think
vice
might be interested,
moderator,
but it's
and also to the person that put together the bulletin. It's part of community partnership. So there's a lot of information that I have access to because of the nature of, my situation. But there may be other people that, as I said before, don't know.
right. You missed that Sunday and then you just missed it completely. You didn't even see it coming. Yeah.
Well, that was one good thing about that retreat we did a couple of years ago, because if you take a couple days together and people commit to that time, and you can bring people along to what folks are thinking about and some of the issues, and engage people differently than, if it's just an hour here, an hour there after church, because we don't live in the same neighborhood, all these issues that are pilgrims, we're all kind of divided out. So that was really a really nice part about that retreat, was being able to spend time and get on the same page, and kind of a lot of people came to that. A lot of people made it, which was great.
Right.
And when we did the New Beginnings originally, we got people together, and people, that was probably the last time we did get people in small groups with people that normally they probably wouldn't have any contact with, and had an opportunity to, share some things.
I mean, we could do small groups during worship if we wanted to. We could break into groups of 3 or 4 and ask a question and have people share and then come back. I mean, that's what we do on Zoom all the time. I don't know if it's a worship thing or not, but maybe it's after church. If, you know, if we want people to dialogue about some of the questions.
Yeah, what problem does that solve?
It solves the problem that a lot of people don't have their voices heard or don't have input into the life of the church potentially, and like to get to know other people and to brainstorm on ideas, and brings them into the process of caring about what the future is of the church. Because they're in a small group and they're sharing, they're not just listening to someone else talk at them.
Well, it seems to me that that's a strategy that addresses about 3 different problems and not all of them equally well. If what we want is for people to be able to get information about what's going on, we could have a mechanism that gives them information, like having a more robust email goes out every week, or we do more with the web page. I mean, we can, there are ways that folks routinely put information out. If we want to listen to folks, what we need to do is set up a feedback mechanism. When something isn't working well for people, what do they do? I mean, Carol, I got an email from your mom because she was having trouble finding the right Zoom link for Sunday worship, but she finds it easier to get in to the meditation on Thursday, right? So she let me know that. Well, what am I going to do with it? I forwarded it to Reverend A but it's like people don't know how to give feedback in such a way that it's really going to make a difference. And then there's the problem of how do we really feel like somebody's listening to us, that we're being known just for who we are, not because we have a complaint to make. So I would just encourage us to be really clear about when we're looking for a strategy, let's make sure we know what the problem is that we're trying to solve. And is this the one that will do that most effectively? And there may be several things that we can do that will help us create what we need. And we did break up into small groups one Sunday on worship. So I don't know whether you were there, Carol, but the technical problem was it was hard for people who are worshiping by phone.
And Zoom.
Or on Facebook.
Yeah, Facebook. Yeah.
So where are we? We got about 20 minutes left in the time we've set aside for this afternoon. What feels to each of us like what's the direction we need to be moving?
Have people gotten new ideas from our conversation today about what would be a good way to focus one-on-one conversations, or a better way, different way to focus one-on-one conversations with other pilgrims?
Just jump in, Rana.
Well, again, I'm going back to another workshop that I was at, but one of the questions they had, they divided it into what they were asking the question, what do you love about the church? And then what makes you come alive was another kind of follow-up kind of question. And they divided it into, and I'm not sure this is helpful or not, but it is divided into physical, mission, worship, ministry, and financial. What do you love about each of those areas of the church? So I don't think that's particularly helpful, but I wonder if it's something about what's essential. You know, what what qualities or what programs or what ministries are just central to what people feel are, you know, that led them to Pilgrim or have kept them at Pilgrim, or, you know, make them want to make them want to see it continue. So somehow it's helping folks name those things for themselves, and really listening to what they have to say, you know. So,
Mhm. I liked both of those first questions that you said.
what do you love about the church, and what
What do you love makes you come
makes you
alive?
come alive?
I also wonder about a question, Mark, in one of your emails leading up to this meeting, you talked about how do we, what is the, where do Pilgrim's gifts meet the greatest need?
Mm-hmm.
So I wonder if there's a question that might just, ask what do people see as the greatest need right now?
Well, let's try that quickly. What from what you this, we can always change our minds. I certainly change my mind often enough. But at the moment, if you were to say what what that's sort of core about the integrity, the authentic pilgrim, and the hurting world, where does the heart of Pilgrim meet the hurts of the world? Okay, I've been thinking about it. So it seems to me that one of the things that is characteristic of Pilgrim that is somewhat unique is its biracial nature. It has been for a long time a stably not just biracial but multi-class. It's a very diverse community, but particularly around race in the West End of St. Louis, that's a big deal. And so the heart of Pilgrim is a racially inclusive identity in a world that's hurting because of racial divisions. And so being in the world in such a way that we are addressing that issue in the way that we show up with each other and in conversation with the world. So that's my bid at the moment. Maybe that's not a question that we can just kind of off the cuff respond to. I cheated. I was working on that before, so maybe we just want to kind of ponder that. Is that I mean, Jenny found that to be a helpful question. I don't know. Is that work? Is that work?
Well, it's the reason that Rita and I came to Pilgrim.
Okay.
And it's the reason that I think we at least one of the reasons that we stayed.
Well, it's definitely the reason I came. That's what I was looking for and couldn't find anyplace else, you know, where it was authentic and you know, folks have stood together for, you know, over time, and it's not just, we just have some folks floating in and out that are different races. That doesn't do it for me. You know, I mean, I feel like it needs to be long-term relationships. And so, but yeah. The other thing that just struck me, which may not make any sense, but I've been thinking about this whole, what are we, one of the characteristics that we have is we have a lot of folks in that sandwich generation. You know, we've got elderly parents, you know, that we're taking care of. So we're doing that caregiving role. And I know that that's the case in the community as well. You know what I mean? Like there's folks are struggling with that, caring for their elderly parents as they're trying to stay working. I'm not sure how we could, you know, how it could serve us and serve the community as well. But I just see it as something that there could be some commonalities where we wouldn't be coming in offering food to the community. It would be something that we would be nurtured by too, but that we could offer a space for folks, and perhaps support for people, because I really, you know, I'm so lucky. I have a sister and a brother here in town, and my mom's doing well and all that stuff. But for folks who have a job and a mom and a grandmom who they're taking care of, you know, how do they get support that they need and help making transitions to other facilities, all kinds of things that we could potentially help with? Is that a ministry that, no, and again, that's just an idea, but I just, it seems like something that a lot of us are going through, and would be empathetic about other folks that have to deal with that.
Um, I would just say, you know, Mark, when I was trying to answer your question, I think I thought of something along those same lines, but you know, I just thought of it more in terms of, you know, how can Pilgrim be a place that, you know, just people from the different people come together kind of in all the messiness and reality of that, but you know, we are just being together in a real and authentic way. And I don't know if, you know, what you were just talking about, Rana, speaks to, you know, people of different generations as well as different economic backgrounds and ethnic backgrounds. And
So let me just suggest that we kind of continue to pray about that. It does seem to me that that's a way of framing what is the purpose of Pilgrim. And we didn't get a lot of response to my suggestion that seems to be the kind of the central issue for us here, is to be able to discern the purpose, and the programs and the other stuff evolve from that. Remembering that what we're aiming at doing is presenting specific recommendations to the congregation at some meeting that's going to happen in the fall. We'd be able to think about, well, what are we recommending? What could we possibly recommend that would make the kinds of changes to bring the vitality that we're looking for, to, you know, for us to be considering what all that would be. We're going to lose both Rons here. Ron Hill, when are you guys going to be back?
August 3rd, he said, I think. That's what Rita said,
August?
August
Okay.
3rd.
All right. And Ron Gauss?
August the 10th.
Okay. And Jerry, you and Richard will be back in town late July, right?
The 29th.
Okay. So that's almost August.
I can probably make the meetings. I've got a 7-hour time differential. So I could at least make 10 o'clock to 11 o'clock at night, which would be the first hour. So I could still be in touch. I don't want to commit to later than that because I think I'd keep the rest of the household up after that.
Okay. Well, we certainly hope you can make it, but we won't bet on it. Let me get my list in front of me here. Today we are missing Connie, Richard, and Hardy. Hopefully we will get Richard back the end of July, but hopefully Hardy and Connie can join us next time we meet. So, Rana, you.
I just wanted to ask a question about, Carol, you said you spoke to a few people. I don't know who to speak to because like I call everybody all the time. So I don't want to, like double dip or, like make, it seems like maybe we should figure out a way to, these people have been talked to and these people still need to be talked to or something. I don't know.
Sure. I spoke to Susan Brand, Marcia, and my mom, and I'm talking to Christine tonight.
Okay. That's helpful.
Good. So
Have you all started meeting in person?
No.
Do you have a sense of when that will happen?
September 12th is the date that's floated out there.
Oh, okay.
So I would like for us to meet in person. I guess August 10th, you're going to be back, Ron? Is that what you said?
I'm not sure what time during the day and how I'm going to be, but yeah.
You'll be jet lagged for sure.
Yeah. So
it won't be then, but at some point mid-August, I'd like for us to all get together in person. In the meantime, we will continue to meet virtually this way. How soon should we meet again? We're gonna be looking up articles. We're gonna write to each other. Let's commit to doing a lot of engagement with each other by email and responding to each other. I will continue to send you about half of what I write. So
I recommend 2 weeks to give us an opportunity to communicate one-on-one with the congregants.
okay, that will be July 22nd.
Oops, I got something today.
Why did you suggest that, Reverend A? Whoops.
I'm sorry, you really do have something on the 22nd?
I'm checking now. I was actually joking. Just as a
I
follow-up.
thought you were, and then Rana was.
No, I was actually joking, but
Okay,
I'm checking now.
I think it would also be good if, as we talk to people or as we're planning to talk to people, just email the group. So as Rana said, we know who's being contacted and can.
Who else needs to be? Yeah.
Right.
Right.
Would it be easier to just divvy out the names on the roster? So we don't have to be overly concerned about double booking. I mean, it's just a thought.
Well, I think it depends on how many of us are planning and on actually doing it. I don't think Ron Gaussen will be able to from.
Well, let me suggest that as you contact people and kind of have you feel like you've had a reasonably robust conversation. If you would let me know, I will keep a roster of who's been contacted, and from time to time send to everybody, here, we haven't had a conversation yet with so-and-so. So I'll be kind of the hub if you just let me know who you've spoken to, because we're not all going to be equally available. It's not like we're going to say, well, everybody pick 5 names. That kind of thing isn't going to work, I don't think.
Yeah.
Was that
And
sound like a good plan? Jenny?
Oh, I just was gonna say, I plan to contact Marie Dargan as my first person.
Great.
And it sounds like we're switching from talking about the building and the mission to a little bit more of the questions we talked about today, or it's just wherever the conversation goes, or.
Yeah, I would say wherever the conversation goes. I mean, the two items that we had that, came out of our last meeting were just sort of happenstance. I don't think those were the central questions. So you can certainly touch on those, but I personally, Jenny and I agree that where does the heart of Pilgrim meet the herd of the world seems like a good, I don't know whether people are going to be able to get their heads around that, but you can see where that goes in conversation with folks.
Yeah, we're coming up with a list of questions for those pandemic conversations, and it may, some of those, when you see those, they may be good questions to talk to people about, just to kind of, how has Pilgrim helped you through this? That kind of thing. What does it mean to you to be part of this community? All righty, gotta go.
All right.
Happy trails, Ron Gauss.
Thank you.
Yeah. Safe travels.
Safe travels.
And Ron Hill too.
And Ron Hill too.
So thank you all. And I'll send out the link to the recording for this. I want to go back and catch all those things I didn't hear the first time through. And please, let's be as connected to each other as we can be. We're talking about the need for relationship and how important relationship is. Let's model that.
Can you use a larger font? I print these out and I can barely read them when I print them out because I can't read on the screen. So if you'll use a little bit bigger font, it would help me.
Or you could change the font, but okay, I'll do my part.
And
I can change it.
to her point, Mark, for whatever reason, your font is much smaller than any font I've ever seen from.
Is that
any-
right? Okay.
It comes in about 8. It comes in about 8.
Yeah, it is tiny.
All right. I'll crank it up.
Of course, it's gonna be 6 pages then, but that's beside the point.
True.
All right. Thanks for the feedback.
Yeah. Great.
All right. Be well,
Thanks.
everybody.
Bye-bye.
Good
All
night.
right, thank you. Bye.
Bye, everybody.